Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Adam Corey, and I'm here to present a brief webinar today talking about some of the things that your tag manager should be doing. This will be helpful for a lot of us that may want to do a checkup with our existing solutions and see what features should be supported, as well as giving us some context around how we should look at what tag management solutions should be doing if we're new to that particular space. My name is Adam Corey. I run marketing here at Telium. Telium is the leader in real-time customer data solutions and tag management. So excited today to meet with all of you, and I look forward to connecting with you on LinkedIn as well. So I thought I would start for a moment and talk a bit about what tag management is, but maybe take a slightly different approach to it for today's webinar. So I think a lot of us are probably familiar with some of the fundamentals of tag management, but really, as we think about what tag management should be, I wanted to put in 4 key elements that will set the stage for today's conversation. I think first and foremost, tag management should give your marketing team and your analytics groups and your wider organization more agility while removing implementation risk and cost for implementing your different vendors. It should remove developer bottlenecks, but still allow for oversight and governance. So it's one thing to just remove bottlenecks, but if you're not doing it in a responsible manner, you could introduce problems down the line. This then allows you to future-proof your marketing stack by getting all of your vendors and technologies on the same page while giving them the full set of data surrounding them, and also giving you the ability to plug and play new technologies down the line as needed. And finally, since tag management allows you to implement all of your vendors, it should really act as the foundation for all of your customer data and marketing and technology initiatives down the line. So why is this so important? Well, in a study we did in the end of last year, surveying retail organizations and beyond, we found that most of them are looking at new investments this year. And so we need to have a universal approach to building those experiences. Another study that we did both in 2012 as well again last year, we asked, we partnered with eConsultancy on this, is we asked across the board, how many vendors do you use to make up your customer experience? And not only did we find that most of us out there have 21 or more vendors that we're working with, but also the number of vendors that we're working with increased for most of us between 2012 and 2015. So this problem is becoming more important, and when we think about some of our more complex implementations that we have, such as our web analytics or digital analytics solutions, 56% of us are looking this year to enhance that existing implementation, which requires code changes and additional features maybe being implemented. And over a third of us are either adding or changing our analytics vendor this year. So no matter which way you look at it, taking an approach that looks at how you work with these vendors, how you implement them, and how you scale them for the long term is very important, because we're needing to be more agile to adapt to customer needs, and therefore we need to have the same agile approach with how we implement such solutions. So, talking a little bit about what tagging is for those of you who may be newer to it. A tag is really a concept that's been around for over a decade, and it really refers to a piece of JavaScript or an image pixel or something that goes on your website that fuels another vendor. It could be used to collect data to send off to your analytics vendor, as we talked about, but it can also be technologies that add new functionality to your website, such as maybe chat or social elements on your website. So this can really be a lot of different technologies, and I think from some of the most recent studies out there from Chief Martech and others, we're now around 3,000 different technologies that all have a tag or an implementation that just requires some opening up the hood on your website. But the problem is, if you don't have a centralized approach to this, each of these solutions is implemented on their own without knowledge of each individual one, and there's no equity that can be gathered amongst the data and shared between the vendors. Each vendor is really on their own. So tag management really gives you the ability to have a central foundation that not only fuels all of the vendors that you're working with, but gives you a foundation to build what we like to call a data supply chain, so that all of your vendors, your technologies, your analytic solutions, and your teams can start to work together with the same set of data and a common language between your vendors. And tag management is really the first step in that journey. So for today's webinar, what we wanted to do was talk about some of the top things that your tag manager should be doing. So with that, we narrowed it down to 10 because we didn't want to keep you on here all day. But this is part of a larger list of 25 that we'll share with you after today's webinar. But I wanted to go through 10 of my favorite things that a tag manager should be doing. And the first is around split testing vendors. So I think a lot of us know about split testing content or offers in an email or on a web page, but this concept is not really something that we think about when we go out and add on new vendors. So if we think about the idea of, let's say, your retargeting vendor that you have out there, do you know if that retargeting vendor is the best one for you? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. One of the best ways to know that is to actually test multiple vendors together to see which provides the higher conversion lift. Since if you think back to what we talked about just a moment ago, tag management gives us the ability to de-risk that implementation. I should therefore take advantage of that and try to implement solutions side by side to see what does the best for my business. And so I'm going to walk you through a couple elements here to show you how stuff like this works. And the first is using what we call an extension. So extensions are, in Telium, the concept of solving a task with a tool that doesn't require code. And these are often thought up by customers and developed by Telium. But the one that we have here simply slices up two different vendors, vendor A and vendor B, and I've determined how much of my site traffic I want to send to each one. And therefore, I can go ahead and put some visitors in vendor A, the other half of visitors in vendor B, and then I can have them both do their best and see which one provides the best lift for me on the back end. So this really gives us the ability to think through a new way to maybe approach developers and approach the way that I might work with different technologies. But it doesn't require me to use JavaScript. I think this is one of the things that most people maybe need to take a look at when they're thinking about what a tag manager can do for them. I need to be able to be agile and implement all of my technologies, but as a marketer, I really shouldn't be expected to know JavaScript. If I do need to know JavaScript, that can actually create some problems down the line because maybe I haven't gone to school for it, or maybe I write incomplete code. And so a tag manager should offer the tremendous agility to my marketing team, but it shouldn't require JavaScript because, again, I'm going to have to go back to my development team to ask them to help me out to implement some code. But also, if I'm introducing more and more JavaScript in a more agile way, I could potentially be introducing not only performance problems, but also security risks on my site. So we believe that your tag manager should actually not give you the ability to work without JavaScript entirely. And the first way to do that is by leveraging turnkey tag templates and vendor implementations that don't require any JavaScript whatsoever. So in the UI here inside of Telium's product, we have a walkthrough of exploring all the different tag vendors that you might want to implement. You can search for the one that you want to work with, and then when you select it, you have a three-step process to go ahead and configure that particular tag and add it to your site. The first would be to go ahead and give the ID or information about your account for this particular vendor that you're working with. The second step is to then determine on which pages, if not all pages, you want to load this particular technology. And then the third step is to determine what data you want to take from your existing site and from a data layer that you've established and what you want to map over and make available to that vendor. So that's really it. So these are three steps that all of the tags in the Telium Marketplace support. And you see I didn't write any JavaScript code. So I'm able to not rely on developers, do something on my own, or encourage my own team to work inside of a tag manager without having to get stuck in code. It sometimes might be for a developer, they might want access to JavaScript or want to be able to make edits. This is something that's really important around giving certain people permissions and oversights and a workflow to approve changes. But for the support of your day-to-day tasks, being able to work without JavaScript is key. The next step is really around supporting privacy. So I think privacy is becoming something that's increasingly important as more and more of our interactions with brands goes online and goes digital. It's important for users and companies to have a thoughtful approach to how they manage data that flows between and give users the understanding of how they work with privacy policies. Unfortunately, most vendors work differently, so not all vendors have the same options. They handle opt-out differently. So your tag manager should give you a global approach to working with privacy policies and privacy opt-outs and other tracking settings. So you can actually see this in action if you want to pop over after today's webinar onto our own privacy policy at Tealium.com/privacy. But on there, we actually give, and this is something that's managed inside of our UI, you actually have the ability to give your users the ability to manage and modify their own privacy options. So you can give them the ability to say opt in or opt out of all technologies or certain technologies, such as maybe opt out of advertising but opt into analytics. And it also honors things like your browser's do not track setting as well. So you have the ability to manage this in one place across your entire vendor stack as opposed to managing it by each individual vendor. So tag management is great, but one of the things that can be daunting is if you've had a long history of implementing tags on your site on individual pages or maybe in your content management system, and then you move to a tag manager, how do you know that you have all the tags that you need to work with? So the ability to scan and find those missing tags is really important. It ensures proper and complete data governance, and also makes you sure that everybody is working within the tag management framework that you developed, and there aren't any one-offs that exist out there. So having a tag manager that's able to scan your site and crawl at both the static and dynamic pages that you might have in your site, to be able to go in and then alert you in a report that says, hey, we found a tag that wasn't actually implemented through your tag management solution. Here's the page it was on. Here's the information about the tag. So that way you can go in and migrate that tag into your centralized tag management strategy. Really helpful for those with lots of pages and really large sites. And also gives us the ability to make sure that I have one cohesive approach to everything. The next step is really supporting your business rules when it comes to how and when to load different technologies. So we call these load rules, and what load rules really are a way for you to determine what pages, what conditions, what users, and really what time periods you want to actually load particular technologies. So most of the time, a tag manager will give the ability to load based on a URL. And that's really helpful, but I might have a lot more nuanced information on that page that might determine where and when I might want to load a technology, such as if I have a social marketing technology that I want to load an offer, maybe I don't want to load that offer for all users, I just want to load it for users that are in my high value segment. Or maybe I want to test out a vendor and my contract for my proof of concept only lasts for the month of June, so I might want to set a start date and an end date to this tag so that it automatically expires at the end of June. This is what the concept of a load rule is. So I can come in and I can select individual data elements, perhaps such as my page name or order total, and then I can create my conditions to say if a page name contains this or if a order total is above this value, I can go ahead and load this tag on those particular scenarios. The next, and this comes into making sure that I have support for everything in my digital marketing initiatives, is making sure that my tag manager can support testing initiatives. So these are those great multivariant and A/B split testing solutions that you may be using today or you may want to use in the future. But because they have some specialized requirements, such as maybe they prefer to be loaded synchronously, or maybe you want to load them asynchronously, or you want a mix of the two, this is giving you the ability to make sure that you have those capabilities inside of your tag management solution, so you not only can implement them the same way as every other technology, but also expand your testing implementations across more pages as your testing needs mature. So this follows just the same way that the earlier tag implementation that I showed you. Just gives you the ability to find the vendor that you want to work with and choose which mode you want to work with this particular technology in. Again, asynchronously or synchronously, potentially, to give you the different options for how you might want to load and how you might want to mitigate things like flicker and other implementation considerations for testing vendors. The next, and this is an interesting one, and this is where I think you sometimes don't recognize that a tag manager can help to solve maybe shortcomings or nuances that exist with different technologies. And this is around something like converting currencies or making changes from data on your page and transforming it before it goes to a vendor. This could be anything from lowercasing values or joining multiple data values into one before you send it off to a vendor, but it also could be for things like currency conversion. So let's say your analytics vendor or your conversion pixel for one of your vendors only supports one currency, but lo and behold, you sell in multiple currencies because you're a global company. How do you actually handle that? So this is, again, using one of those extension concepts that we talked about earlier, which gives you the ability to make changes or to tackle some particular use cases, again, without writing JavaScript code. So in this case, I simply come in, I add an extension, I determine which tags I want to make sure that this applies to, and then I simply say I want to convert one currency into another. And it will go ahead and look up the exchange rate for you and then convert this currency for you before it goes into that particular vendor. So a really nice way to be able to mitigate an issue or potentially get more value out of a vendor without having to come up with a really difficult implementation approach. The next, and I think this one's really important to think about, certainly as you introduce tag management as the foundation to your marketing team and your customer-focused teams. As I give more power to that group and remove the bottleneck or the reliance on developers to implement every individual technology, I need to make sure that with that power, I honor the great responsibility that comes with that power. So making sure that not only I have workflows and approvals, et cetera, but also that I have a really robust and full transparency around every change that's happened from every user within my tag management solution, et cetera. So this is a look at every change that's happened really since the beginning of time. I can scroll through, sort down, and see changes that were made maybe to my dev environment versus to my production site, and I can actually drill into each individual change, who made it, what were the notes that they made around this particular change, and if I need to, I can always roll back to it. So it gives me the ability not only to see everything that's happened, but potentially to roll back to previous versions if I so choose. The next one is around copying profiles. And you may not know offhand what a profile might be, but a profile in our world is really how I manage different sites or apps based on something that maybe makes them different, maybe different brands in my portfolio or different regions of my site. Maybe I have one version in the US and I have a different one for the UK, or maybe I want to manage microsites. Each one of these profiles gives me the ability to have different rules and workflows, but also different tag implementations and vendors for each one. Now, what's interesting about this is not only the great ability to have multiple profiles, but also having the ability to copy and paste. So that way, when it comes time to add a new a new profile for the future, I don't have to start from scratch. So let's take, for example, the example of I have a US site up and running today, and I have a profile that has my data layer, my individual vendors and preferences, et cetera, already set for the US. And then I want to come in and simply create a new one for the UK. So I come in, I click Create Profile, and then I determine which elements I want to copy over. And this can be, again, everything from what users have access to it, what extensions and load rules and other things that I've done. So I get all of that great work that I've done previously copied over into a new place, and then maybe I can make some adjustments if I want to from there. Finally, the last one is my personal favorite, and that's giving me the ability to detect a tag from code. And this came in a real-world scenario for me a while back where someone sent me code to implement on our site. And they didn't explain exactly what the code was or what individual variables I needed to implement, and since I like to have the approach of not having to work with JavaScript, it was a little daunting when I got this to implement on a page, and then it's hard for me to actually figure out beyond hunting and pecking and saying, okay, I see Google Analytics in there, but I don't quite know if this is the standard code or what this is. So having a feature that allows me to search the tag marketplace or all the different vendors that are in the Telium tag marketplace, I can go ahead and copy and paste in what I got via email and click the detect configuration option. And not only does it tell me what individual vendor that was, but it goes ahead and extracts out the individual elements that are hard-coded in there. In this case, there was a tracking ID in there. So this not only saves me time, but it also makes sure that I can continue to work in a JavaScript-free world and make sure that things follow a set template that's already been tested and approved. It also helps me in the future if this particular vendor updates their code by extracting out the individual tracking elements from the JavaScript itself. It allows me to upgrade the code itself or upgrade the tag in the future, but keep all those data elements the same over time, which is really helpful. So these are our quick run through of the top 10 things that we should all think about our tag managers and our tag management solutions being able to provide both for functionality today as well as in the future. As I mentioned, these are just a few. We'll send you after today's call a list of the 25 things that you should be thinking about when it comes to evaluating and upgrading your tag management solution. But I'd like to thank everybody for their time on the call today, and we look forward to continue the conversation. Thanks so much.